Lovely to be here. As Brendan introduced me, my name's Daniel Keane. I'm co-founder of an ecological consulting firm called Predict Ecology. So here's a photo of a mountain stream that I know in the wet tropics. And I'd like you to think about what's happening here. I'd like you to think about the natural information, the processes, the natural capital. So there's water purification, hydrological and geological processes. There's air purification, photosynthesis, carbon storage. Obviously there's biodiversity, plants, and presumably animals. It looks like a pretty fishy sort of a stream. Collectively, there's these ecosystem services, and it's natural capital that's based on interactions. This, however, is only one snapshot in time. Let's say that the exposure was a second. That would mean that there's 86,400 of these snapshots just in one day. And this is a high volume, high velocity, huge data set. So, human beings are very busy. They're always moving and always changing. And as a result, natural resources can be easily overlooked. They're around us every minute of every day. They're where we live. But because we're busy with our lives, it's easy not to notice these services until something's not right. Something changes. And this is called degradation. Degradation of land, water, air, biology, and culture. Now, these are a very simplified example. But for example, land. We have soil fertility issues. We have groundwater issues, rising of groundwater. We have salinity, desertification, and erosion. With water, we have water pollution. We have sedimentation and changes to hydrological flows. With air, obviously, we've got carbon. Everyone knows about that. But we also have things like ozone and PM10 and sulfur dioxide, and the list goes on. When it comes to biology, we have species extinctions, habitat fragmentation, and poaching of CITES-listed species. On the human front, we have loss of language, we have cultural site degradation, and unfortunately, we have loss and theft of First Nations intellectual property rights. So we're on the brink of a global precipice. Biodiversity collapse will change the ecosystem services that we have come to expect and that we take for granted. So how do we prevent this? Well, we start recording the complexity of the natural system. We value it, and we use this understanding of the complexity to improve our sustainability, and we do so using BSV. So we hear this sustainability word used to assist us in preventing this degradation, a way of being mindful of the interactions that we have. Now, I like to think of sustainability as an interaction between humans and the natural system that does not damage the value of the natural system. And by extension, an interaction that can be achieved in a regenerative, dynamic way, a self-sustaining interaction. But how? Well, we must first know what we are doing. And for that, we need empirical, real-world data. So we've got to go and measure things. From that good data, we can then make models and inferences and track trends over time. This example is a machine learning dataset and model that I've produced to predict litter, grass, and tree cover, I think it was. Yeah, something to that effect. Okay, but good data is hard to find. I want data with volume, so I want lots of it. I want data with velocity. I want it to be current. I want data with variety. Ecology is complex, so let's not simplify this. I want veracity, because it's absolutely worthless if it's not accurate. I want value. I want to be able to do rigorous analysis. And if it's not accurate and not verifiable, how can I use it? I also want valid data. So I want data that's directed. What are you recording and why? So where's the good data? Well, there's open science, there's government data, there's university data, there's consultants' data, there's citizens' data, and there's First Nations data. There are many frameworks developed by many brilliant minds that are trying to solve sustainability while supporting development. One such is the United Nations Environmental Programme. Sorry. Now, I've been involved in sustainable development of natural resources and permitting for most of my life, most of my career. And one such tool that I've used is an ESIA, so an Environmental and Social Impact Assessment, or an EIS, an Environmental Impact Assessment. So in my state of Australia, Queensland, an EIS is defined as a rigorous assessment of the environmental, social and economic impacts. And it sort of goes a little like this. So a proponent will submit a draft terms of reference. That draft terms of reference will then go out to public. The public and the government will be able to comment on it and make alterations, extra little bits that they want to see in this impact assessment, this report. The EIS is then, the terms of reference is then finalised, and the EIS is then publicly, the terms of reference is publicly notified, and we can now start our EIS report. So an EIS provides a comprehensive description of the current environment, all potential environmental, social and economic impacts of that project, and the development of proposals to manage, mitigate or offset those potential impacts. So these impacts may be direct, indirect, or cumulative, and they may result from the construction, commissioning, operation or decommissioning of the project. Their scale, that is their relative magnitude, of the impact is determined by its intensity, duration, irreversibility and risks to the environment, society and the economy. So this process involves multiple public hold points and notifications to ensure that the public, the people who will inherit this project, who will inherit the legacy issues and whose land it is built upon, have their say. The proponent must evaluate and respond to all of these public and private and regulators' feedback. Finally, all things being done, the EIS is finalised and the project is permitted and is allowed to operate. But this rigorous data collection, this very expensive rigorous data collection, often ends up in silos. So here I have 3 theoretical projects. You can see the little silos with their data sets. To my knowledge, this data is not shared. The consultants doing EIS 1 for the dam may not even be aware that the farm, EIS 2, is even taking place, or that the data even exists. Surely some of this data can be shared. Could the data inform the cumulative impacts and residual impacts of these projects? Could the landholders be utilised to collect this information? Could this data be sold? And could the collector be paid for it? So this is how the progression of my data collection has happened. Back in the day, dark days, I used a digital or analogue collection method. Notepads, camera, GPS. I then progressed onto IoT devices, and it was still fairly centralised, sometimes a little bit distributed depending upon the camera or remote cameras or whatnot I was using. Now we're embarking on full IoT. Now these are additive and cumulative, and in an idealised scenario, this will allow the unsiloing of data. I need to collect it digitally first. So this is what my data looks like. SQL tables, linked via a UUID. This allows the analysis, manipulation, and storage as flat files or vectors. It lends itself very well to long-term blockchain storage, validation, verification, and auditing. I use this method in various client-specific ways for the collection of all my consulting data. And here's some data I've loaded on chain. So this was a relatively small data set that I loaded in 2020, 2.4 gig, or about 11.2 million transactions. Back then, it cost about $960 to load those 11.2 million transactions. As of Monday, or last Monday, when I wrote this, it would have cost me $96. And I've now since been told that that price has floored even more. it would cost about in the order of $20. 11.2 million data points for $20. So, our techniques have also improved since then. Here's an example of some tree data that I loaded onto the BSV blockchain and used varying H3 resolutions to calculate species diversity. What I've shown here is tree species diversity in the city of, I think it was Geelong? Yeah. But this data could be so much more. It could be water rights. It could be water extraction values. It could be water quality. It could be mineral resources and licenses. It could be tons of wheat or rice produced in a field. This data can be layered. It can be interrelated, correlated, analysed as stacks. So since 2020, Paul Chiari, the fellow that just spoke before, has included some additional tools that I utilise. So here is the Merkle root of a 200 megabyte spatial data set. Each data point was encoded and hashed. These hashes were then combined into a Merkle tree as per the diagram, and the root of that Merkle tree was included into an op return of the transaction, which I've highlighted here in yellow. So with this technique, I'm able to prove the data's integrity. Using MetaStream's suite of tools, we have encoded it, hashed it, and created a root of the Merkle tree, and that went into the op return. It's on the blockchain. So say you want to use my data. You purchase it, I send it to you, and you verify it. This is blockchain. This is smart trust. You can encode it as previously described, then use the hash and the Merkle proof of the transaction, which you can see there on the left, to calculate the Merkle root. You can then verify the leaf's proof for any random data point. Now, you may not want to check all of the data points. Some of our data sets can range up to 3 billion rows and lengths, but you could if you wanted to. In this example here, I've used the leaf proof for index 32, a bush food tree. And this can verify the authenticity, accuracy, and veracity of the data sets. So back to my example of an EIS, but this time with a little bit of blockchain integration. Same process, but firstly, the terms of reference are issued as a draft smart contract and then compiled as a distributed application. The public can then interact with this distributed application and provide traceable and auditable input. The final terms of reference can be issued as an application either on MetaNet or as a smart contract, and it can be authorised by various multi-party signatures. So we're talking about government departments, proponents, stakeholders. And this is where it gets cool. The technical studies, the field work, the data analysis, the risk assessments, the management plans, all of these really important, really valuable tools can be made traceable through blockchain from raw data through modelling and analysis to the derived management decisions with all the data on chain. So then the draft EIS is published. It can be published as a smart contract or a distributed application. The public can then respond to it, make comments, it can be peer reviewed, and all of this information can be traced, audited and tracked. Finally, the EIS report can be issued as a smart contract with multi-signature parties, various government agencies being able to then sign off on it. This data is now no longer in silos, but on a permissioned public-private contract, smart contract, MetaNet, DAG, there's various opportunities there. We'll work out what we can finally use. But it'll allow future consultants and proponents and the public to possibly access and audit and learn from this data. To take this a step further, the permitted project can now be regulated by a smart contract, with monitoring and management results being instantly auditable and verifiable. This will improve our environmental and ecological management. And this concept this conceptual example of how blockchain might fit into a mature regulatory framework, such as an environmental impact assessment, it can be used for so much more in the natural resource management and sustainability stage, because we need to remember why we're doing this. So this is a little 10-second clip of one of our remote cameras. That's a red-legged paddy melon, and it's just doing its thing. Thank you.